Done. All right. Hello and good morning. It is, well, actually a good day because, you know, maybe morning here, but it might be a good day for you wherever you are. It is Talk and Tell with Holly and Kel. Welcome. My name is Kel Humphries. I'm an author, speaker, and survivor of child sexual abuse. It is my heart and my passion to empower children and families and to protect kids from child abuse by just being brave, by speaking up, sharing my heart, sharing my knowledge, writing books, and doing these incredible talk shows with my colleague here, Holly and Martin from Safe4Kids Australia. So I'll hand over to Holly. She can introduce herself and we'll get on with today's amazing content.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, I'm Holly and Martin from Safe4Kids. We're a company in Western Australia who specialises in abuse prevention education. We train in every state and territory across Australia, and we believe that we need to start protective education when children are 3. So I've created resources and run training for parents, teachers to help kids keep safe. And I'm really proud to be teaming up with Kelly because we come from quite different backgrounds, but together I think it's some really useful information for lots and lots of people. So thanks, Kelly.
Awesome. Thanks, Hol. Guys, today, and look, we've covered some pretty cool content already, and just looking at how many people are getting on board with us, we know that it's doing what we intended. When we first started this, we weren't really sure, but we knew that people needed to hear this information. And so just from the offset, I just want to say from my point of view, I am a survivor of child sexual abuse. Okay, so everything that I share with you comes from that heart and that space. It is my personal opinion. It is my own research or research that if we use that, it will be quoted. And, you know, it is coming from my own personal experience. And it's the same for Holly as well. So, and she obviously represents Safe4Kids Australia. So just with that in mind, as we go forward, also, I'd like to say that some of the stuff we do touch on can be quite triggering. And I say that in advance before we start because we are opening up some dark spaces. And we do that with the heart that it's going to help bring light into situations that are out there at the moment that maybe you haven't heard about, maybe you're unaware of, or maybe it's your story. And sometimes those things can be quite difficult. So, you know, if it's too difficult and you're struggling, turn it off. It's okay. But I always say, and I say this with every video, in every live that we do, is don't be afraid of triggers. Triggers are, to me, and this is my thoughts on this, triggers are an invitation to respond. It's your body's way of saying, hey, I'm not okay, but there's something here that you need to deal with. And Holly and I are so very open to you messaging us, to reaching out, to connecting. And, you know, if you don't want to put a question in the feed about what we discuss, private message us. Okay, we'll give our website and details at the end of this conversation. But send a message, add it in the feed. But yeah, we are so very happy to support and help you in any way that we can. So with that in mind, today what we are talking about is grooming. Okay, we're going to talk about not so much legislation and things like that, but just what grooming is, because it is very tricky, right? And my personal situation comes from, it started with grooming, okay? And so it's what the 90% is not being discussed, right? So the Royal Commission talked about institutional child sex abuse, okay? It didn't cover the 90% of child abuse that happens behind closed doors with somebody that is known to the child. And that's what we need to be talking about. It's hard, it's grey sometimes, it's yucky, but we don't want it to be yucky. We want these conversations out in the open so that we can, in fact, make this a better space for all families, children, organisations, and it not be a dark and horrible conversation, okay? Because that's where this cycle continues. So that is why that's why we're doing this. So I do just want to, before I'm going to hand over to Holly really shortly, but I just want to give the definition of grooming, because a lot of people don't know what it means, and therefore then are not aware of it happening. But grooming is deliberate, okay? So it's just off the internet. It's actually a pretty decent definition, but it says the action by a pedophile of preparing a child for a meeting, especially via an internet chat room, with the intention, being a key word, so the intention of committing a sexual offence. Okay, and so it's just not an adult connecting with a kid, because there's no reason an adult can't connect with a child. I hope adults are connecting with kids, because that's how kids grow and learn. But what makes it different is the intention behind the connection. And that's how it starts. And that's why we need to be really aware of some certain triggers and behaviours. So we're going to get into some definition stuff. Holly's going to talk about precursors and what a pedophile is thinking or going through at the time in order to make a decision to have the intention to actually groom a child. So Holly, I'm going to hand over to you, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Kel. So Professor David Finkelhor is one of the most renowned experts in the world, and he says that there are 4 preconditions to a perpetrator going to perpetrate against a child. So the first one is that the perpetrator has to be motivated to sexually abuse children. So quite often, that motivation can come from watching child exploitation material and things like that, but they have to be motivated to do it. The second one is they have to overcome their internal inhibitors, which means, that little voice in your head saying, oh, but this isn't right, and they're only a child, and I'll be taking away their innocence. So they have to overcome that, and quite often to overcome that, they might, use alcohol and drugs and things like that to get rid of that little voice in their head. The third one is the external inhibitors. So that's where the grooming comes in, because, they have to get to the child. So what they need to do is they need to get the trust of the parents, the trust of the community. And then the fourth one is that they need to overcome the resistance of the child. And for me, this is a really useful model, because that's where our program comes in. By giving kids the clear boundaries around no one's allowed to touch your private parts, and I've actually created a resource talking to children about what's used in grooming, and I call them secret enablers. And we teach kids about tricks and lies and bribes and blackmail, threat, guilt, shame, conning, because those are all things that are used to take down the child's barriers. So, and tickling and things like that. So teaching consent, all of these things that we've built into our program is where, for me, that's the blocker. And then what you're doing and what we're trying to do together is by creating an awareness around this, so that parents can look at, what are the safety precautions that they're putting into place. I'm quite often asked at parent workshops, Holly, how would I know if somebody was grooming my child? Well, that's like, how long's a piece of string? There's no answer. But the answer that I do give is that if anybody's wanting to spend more time with your child than you are, you need to ask the question. If anybody's nicer to your child than you are, then, that could be a red flag. So, Kel, I know that you've got the 6 things that you're going to talk about.
Oh, well, we can just bounce off that, Holly, because it's, look, again, and some of this research is conducted by Finkelhor again, and Olsen, Elliott and colleagues. And when I looked this up, I just found it really helpful, because it really showed the process. And I just actually want to ask you, what do I want to talk to you about? So when the parents get groomed, because oftentimes, and I remember sharing this at one of my keynote speeches, and I just went off the cuff, as I do, because there was a lot of parents in that room who, and I don't know if it was just the event that I was at particularly, but it always helps when a speaker can go and connect with people beforehand, so they get the kind of feel for the room. And there was a couple of women in there who were just like my mum, and had an experience where their child was abused or whatever, and most of them don't understand, most parents don't understand that they are also groomed, they are also betrayed, and it's part of that before the offence occurs type situation where the groomer goes, do you know what, like, and sometimes they may not even know what they're doing until it happens, but it's just built into their psyche or to their patterns of behavior because it's who they are, unfortunately. And it's tricking and tricking the family, and most of the time, again, they're known to the family already, so you don't assume or you don't think that this person could possibly be somebody who would hurt your child. And so when I was at this talk, I just said, look, to any of the parents out there, I'm just going to set you free right now. I said, it's not your fault, you were betrayed too. And in that statement alone, even though for anyone who's listening to this, you may not believe that to be true, but it is what happens. The pedophile is to gain access to the child, will betray or groom the parents or the caregivers in the situation in order to get access. Okay, and then they isolate the child, which is part of this 6 stages that I want to go through. So again, some of this stuff you may not agree with, but it is what it is. If you're not sure on something, please, as we're going through this, just pop the questions in the feed or send us a message. We're going to go live on this. It may be next week, it may be the week after. I've got lots on next week. But I just want to put it out there because this is such a dark grey area. If we can put light on something or explain something better, or to help you understand so it makes, you know, your situation more clear, even though this is never clear cut, then please just reach out to us. So the 6 stages of grooming are, the first one is actually targeting the victim. And I think, Holly, when you're talking about the precursors, I think essentially a pedophile's maybe already made that decision. They may not know it, but if they're, you know, going through these decision-making processes before they commit an offence, they're already starting to target the victim. And so the offender targets the victim, and again, it's a child, by working out how vulnerable they are. And this is something I've actually never discussed, but there's a thing called the 5 love languages. And I don't know if anyone's ever read it, but it goes through how each of us receives love, okay? And if a child doesn't feel like they're getting a need met, okay, and maybe it's physical touch, like by caregiver or something like that. Maybe it's, you know, gifts of service. There's lots of different ways that we show love. And if a child feels like they're not getting that and a pedophile finds that, that's how they can form that connection really, really fast. So, you know, it's not a fault of a parent or anything like that. It's just that pedophiles are bloody cunning. Okay, there's just no other way for it. And I'm not being trying to be dismissive. This is my story. I was sexually abused by my uncle from the age of 8 until I was 15. Okay, he was the closest member of our family. He read books. He spent time with us. He betrayed my family. He betrayed me. I get it. So anything I say from the heart of someone who's experienced grooming at the heart of it. Okay, so from that, I come from a place of love to share this with you and to share with Holly, because we come from 2 different areas to give this to you, and that's why we're working so well together. So, but yeah, it does start early with those decision-making processes Holly was talking about, and even for pedophiles, they may not even know, because I think it must be, and probably Frida Briggs has got something to say about this, but it's a decision, it's who they are, it's innately built into them, and it may not be a conscious process until they actually sexually offend against the child. But the first step of the grooming is the selection of the child. So it's based on the appeal, the attractiveness, the ease of access, or the perceived vulnerabilities of the child. And child molesters are found to target children based on family situations. So those living in single family household, they're not as supervised perhaps as other families, but the custodial parent may rely on others for support. And maybe that's where the pedophile or the groomer comes into that situation. So this is just from Elliott and colleagues in 95 found that 49% of child molesters target children who lacked confidence and self-esteem, and another 13% targeted innocent and trusting children. And that's online as well. Sorry,
And
Hope.
Kel, children with special needs are even more vulnerable
Yes.
to all of this.
Yes.
So, they don't have sometimes the language skills to be able to
No.
tell. They don't have the same group of mainstream children of friends that might help protect them. And more adults have access to them through going to therapy and respite and things like that. So this is why it's even more imperative that kids with special needs learn protective education as well as their network around them, be more vigilant.
And a way to voice it too, because some of them actually cannot speak or can't hear. And I think, Holly, and I don't have stats in front of me, but isn't it like they're 3 times more likely to be sexually offended against if they're in 7 times? There you go.
And the Royal Commission, I think it's 85% of women with special needs will be sexually abused in their lifetime.
Yeah, no, we want to change the stats, okay? That's what we're doing. But yeah, so it's just the targeting of the victim is a well-planned process, okay? It's the first step to the sexual grooming process. So yeah, we don't want to think that the people closest to us are going to sexually offend against people that we love, but this is what happens. And a groomer doesn't wear a certain hat. They don't have a certain they don't have a certain outfit. They're often people in authority. They're often people who manage organisations, coaches, employees, people in government positions, and at the end of the day, we are all form part of the workforce, okay? And there's just a certain percentage of us that are, inclined to sexually offend against children, which is unfortunate. But that's why we want to reduce these stats through this education process. It's just the same way that, you could work in an organisation and some people are just bad eggs. So the more aware we can be, the more we can put strategies in place to protect kids. The second stage, guys, is gaining the victim's trust, okay? So the sex offender gains trust by watching and gathering information about the child. So they get to know them. They spend time with them, read books to them like my uncle did, right? They know all the things that they love. Like I love fishing, I love camping. So my uncle spent time with me fishing and camping and did the things I loved, so that when it came time to spend time, well, we went fishing and camping. So it became opportunistic, didn't it? So it's about how much time they're spending, what they're learning about your child, and just be aware, like, as they're gaining the victim's trust, what behaviours are changing in that process. So while this is happening, and Holly, this might be a really good time to share your friend's message, because gaining the victim's trust is building that moment of time. But little things are already starting to happen. Like my uncle would touch my bum as I would go through the barbed wire fence. So it didn't become a big deal for him to touch my bum, did it? Did you want to share now, Holly?
Yeah, if you like. So after our last live, a beautiful mum reached out to me and gave me consent to share her story. I spent an hour on Sunday having a chat with her and just going, because she wanted people to learn from her story. She's a survivor. And she wanted people to understand that when we say sexual abuse, it's the whole spectrum. And, last time I talked about it could be an old man flashing at a bus stop, the kids seeing porn, right to the most heinous acts. And people focus on that. But her story was she was sexually abused by her grandfather, but he never ever touched her. From the age of 4 is the earliest memory she has of it. He would, expose himself to her. And another trigger warning, I'm going to tone it down from what she told me, but it still could trigger people. But he would, and I hope I do her story justice, because, I'll do my best. But what she wanted people to know was, even though he never touched her, it still had just as big an impact on her life. And it went on for 16 years. So he would expose himself, he would masturbate in front of her. But it started off just with, like you said, Kel, just with the simple, the exposure. And the first time she didn't say anything. And then it progressed to get, a lot more graphic. But she was never, ever threatened. She was never, ever made, he never said, don't tell anyone or anything like that. She just instinctively knew not to tell anyone. And she spent a lot of time with her grandparents because her mother had a mental health issue and would be going into hospital and things like that. But this is where society grooms children, because it was made very clear to her she was never allowed to talk about her mother's mental health issues. So when you're a child and you think, well, I can't talk about that, I can't talk about these other things either. So it's really important that, and again, with our program, we teach kids, you can talk to someone about anything. It doesn't matter what it is. And you wouldn't go to your whole class and tell mum's in hospital, but you could talk to somebody on your safety team. And so she's telling me all of this stuff, and how at 19, she was actually under a therapist, and it came out, and she disclosed to her parents, and both her mother and father believed her, which isn't everybody's experience, unfortunately. But then they were going to confront the grandfather. And so an uncle came over from Sydney. They went to confront the grandfather. He didn't admit to it, but he didn't deny it either. Her parents believed her, the rest of the family didn't. But what she wants people to know is that, you know, it doesn't have to be contact, and it still just has, you know, such an impact on your life. And she was so grateful for the work that we've done together, because one of the stories she was telling me, how she was laying on the settee as a teenager with her feet on her grandfather's lap, and he was rubbing her feet, and then he started to rub himself. She's on the phone to a girlfriend, and she said that, you know, hearing Kelly's words talking about disassociation and things like that was so powerful, because she didn't say anything to her friend. She didn't pull away. It was like there were two things going on, but she was just chatting to her friend, and, you know, him touching himself and her feet at the same time was just like an out of body experience. She also talked about how blatant his exposure was. He would do it while the grandmother was in the room. There was a kitchen bench. He was in front of her. The grandmother was behind, so she could only see the grandfather. And that was like the thrill of you know, how it was able to go on. He was doing it in plain sight of everybody, but yet nobody saw anything. Nobody saw the indicators and things like that. So yeah, I hope I've done her story justice. But the fact that she was brave enough to tell and want her story shared, because, you know, sexual abuse impacts people in so many different ways. You know, the same action could happen to 3 different people, and they all have 3 different experiences. Even if it was an old man flashing at a bus stop, kids would go, oh yeah, that dirty old bloke. And then other kids, it could have a total different impact. So not to discount anybody's abuse either by saying, oh, well, at least he didn't touch her, or at least it wasn't this. You know, we need to honour everybody's suffering, because, you know, it does impact your lives.
Yeah. And it's funny, Holly, because when people, it's not always so bad. Like even your comment there, it's just like, oh, he didn't touch her. It can be very undermining to say those statements.
Yeah.
And it actually silences people. So if I can just encourage anyone, if they're when you're trying to support somebody who's disclosing to you, it's those types of statements, and it's just changing our language a little bit. And yeah, it may make somebody feel better that didn't go that far, but at times it can feel like, yeah, but he still did this. And, you know, if I can just acknowledge, just try not to go down the track of trying to fix it or make it better, but acknowledge them where they're at. Just say, man, I am so sorry that that's happened, and that's your story. How can I support you? And don't, yeah, because for everyone it's different, and until we know them enough to know how it's impacted them, just leave it open and let them lead you. I think that's probably the best way. It may not be the only way. I'm just saying, I mean, and from my own experience, that's how it happened with me. Like there was, you know, exposures and little touches, and yes, it happened in the same room as other people, but it was cheeky, and that's part of the process. And it's desensitizing them, because if that's not the only thing they do, the next step is then to sexually engage the child in further acts. So gaining the victim's trust and, you know, slowly pushing into this space. So you know, we've jumped ahead a little bit, but not really, because it starts with getting the child's trust, and that's only stage 2. But some of these are interwoven with each other too, because, you know, there's a little bit of exposure here, it feels a need here, it, you know, still targeting the victim, you're still grooming the parents, like it's all kind of intermeshed. But when we can understand these stages, we can sort of see how it's happening more. So when we're looking at stage 3, it is actually filling the need. So, you know, again, it might be that your child really values someone who spends time with them, or maybe you've got an only child and they just want to hang out with you, they just want to spend time, but you're busy. It's not your fault, but maybe this person comes in and fills that need that your child is just craving. And again, it's just what they do. They find those kids and they target them. They get to know, you know, what the kid needs. And it's just a shit process. It's just shit. And I'm sorry, but it makes me cranky, because we've got the most beautiful families out there with the most beautiful children. And that's pedophiles do. They target the most vulnerable, beautiful, sweet kids that are there. Like, it doesn't have to destroy you, okay? And I just say that because, you know, and I have never really sort of spoken about grooming openly like this, because it's, you know, it's in my book. But when we start to dissect it, you start to look at the little nuances and the things that have happened, and you just go, oh man, that's you know, why this child? Why that child? Why any child? But why the most beautiful, sweet ones? Like, you know, not that I was beautiful, sweet, but it's just what they do. They look for those needs and they really target those kids. So yeah, so let me just check this for a second. So some things that you might notice. Okay, so these are some cues you might pick up. That there's gifts, that they might be getting gifts from a pedophile, extra attention, affection, and it might be more affection than what is normal. So you might see that they're spending extra time, or your child might not want to be with you over the weekend. So I want to go stay at this person's house. You'd be like, what? Why would you want to do that? And it's because they're feeling this need. They're giving them gifts, they're spoiling them, they're, you know, and, you know, we don't want our kids to be spoiled, but maybe this person is just giving them so much of this thing that, you know, they want to spend all this time. So they're the cues to look out for. If your kid suddenly turns up with money, or lollies, or, you know, maybe they've got an extra $250 on a PlayStation card or something that you don't know where it came from. You know, there's all these little tricks and things that these pedophiles will do to fulfill the kids' needs. Okay, and that's from getting to know them, ask questions. What do you like? What do you want to do? What do you like to do in your spare time? You know, through internet chat rooms and stuff like that. This is where a lot of this is happening. Did you want to add anything, Holly? Sorry.
Yeah. They're also setting up Amazon wishlist accounts, Kel, and getting kids to, you know, perform sexual acts. So they might just say, you know, just take off your top and I'll put $50 into an Amazon wishlist account. And then it progresses and things like that. So now that the online, you know, since Finkelhor did all this study, the online has even, you know, just blown it out of the water.
Yeah.
Also, they're getting children to go into, so get them into different online things. And have you heard of Furbies? So
yeah.
You know, so
they're getting things that talk.
Yeah, but there are these virtual worlds that you can go in and, you know, be a bear or a squirrel or whatever. And that's where they're manipulating kids. They're getting them off some games and then, you know, getting them in these virtual worlds, and then that's another way to desensitize them. So, you know, again, parents need to be over children's shoulders, knowing what they're doing online, because yeah, they're coming into people's homes now. we need to educate families around that as well.
Yeah. And it's hard, and it is actually, it's that moment then that the sexual offending starts to occur. I just saw, where is it? So yeah, it's the trust. Okay, this is when the trust is built between the offender and the child, because they're like, oh, well, he said he'd give me $50 and he did, right? So they know that this person is going to give them what they need. You know, they've been able to spend time with them. They've become a friend. Okay, they've become your friend as a parent, and you're like, oh, that's you know, Bill, he's great, he's a lovely old fella. You know, sorry, I don't know any Bills out there, but I'm just put a random name. Joe Bloggs, okay, we'll call him Joe. We'll call him Joe Bloggs. But yeah, it's just where that trust is built. The trust is built with the family. They do that in order to gain access to the child. Okay, they give the child all the things that they need, that they want, and then the next step is isolating the child. Okay, so that's when there's manipulation, there's talking, there's like, if you say about our friendship, then, you know, we might get in trouble. We don't want to get in trouble. So the kid develops this fear of speaking about the kind of special relationship they have with this person. But they do that to create situations also where they're alone together. So for my example, was fishing and camping, right? So, hey, we're going fishing. I would love Kel to come with us because I know how much she loves fishing. I'm like, yeah, I want to go fishing. Okay. Luckily, I still love fishing, and camping it is still my favorite thing to do. And I haven't lost that part of myself because of how he treated me. But it is that special relationship that they use to isolate the child. So it might be babysitting, tutoring, coaching, special trips that you go away, camping, like fishing times, like going to the beach together. Oh, let me take them shopping. They want to, I'll take them. They need to do this because you're busy at the moment. So that's all right. I'll go down the shop. It's okay. You don't think anything about it because you're like, oh, this person is so helpful and wonderful, because it's filling a need for you too, because you're being groomed. All right. And it's horrible. And if that's your situation, and I don't want this to upset you, I want this to free you. Okay. Because, you know, it is happening and it happens all the time. And we don't want the people that are closest to us, who are helping us, who are genuinely helping us, to be isolated from your family because of what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. But again, it comes back to when I said, if you've got this connection with your child, where they can talk to you about this type of stuff, if, you know, there are gifts being given and boundaries and stuff that haven't been set those boundaries. I would encourage you, like, if you've got that friend, say, hey, if you're going to give anything to my kid, can you please run it past me first? You know, and or just something simple where you've got the rules where the person who is in your life that's supporting you, who may not be a direct family member, you know, that you say, hey, if you're going to give gifts to my kid, can you let me know first? Like, talk to me about it, because if a kid comes home with this stuff, then you know something's probably not right if they haven't said anything to you. So, you know, I don't know, Holly, if you've got any tips in that. So we've got...
Well, yeah, and also, you know, if they single out one child, you know, why is that child always getting taken to, you know, the movies and not my other children and
Yes.
things like that? Make sure that we have to advocate for children. So make sure, you know, I'm happy if you know, in front of me do blah, but it has to be all of my children, because, you know,
Yes.
that's there. And the other thing, Kel, that came up when you're talking about isolation, again, going back to the cyber world, they do isolate them in these chat rooms, and so the kids are always online, but then they turn them on to things like anime and things like that, which also help the grooming process. Yeah. Because some of it's very sexualized and things like that. So, and, you know, they always they like the same music. They say they like this and that the child likes, to get them hooked in.
Yeah. And I just to say too with that, like, I just remember a situation, I got in trouble once because my uncle would let me sit in the front seat, but not my aunt. And it's just that type of stuff that now that comes up, and I think, oh man, like, why wouldn't somebody say anything then? Like, and kids will do that. They're like, man, I really want this to stop, and I know that they're treating me special because I know what they're going to do. Like, when you're at an age, like, I mean, I was 8 up until I was, you know, 15, and so, you know, I started to figure out a few things by the time I was 12, and I was like, oh shit, I know what's going on here. But no one said. I was like, there's a silent language that a victim is trying to speak, but they have no words, and it might come with, I don't know, and this was never, but I would look at my I would look and be like, help me, look in my eyes, I'm trying to tell you something. And I knew it was happening, but I couldn't do anything. I couldn't speak. My words just didn't come. So, and that's okay, because a child feels the fear, and when you're afraid, the stress hormones and the chemicals in your brain flood the language centers of your brain. It actually stops kids from speaking up. Okay, it's a thing, it's real. So go, Holly.
And yeah, I was just going to say, if people want to know more about that, we covered that last week. So
Yes.
it was so, you know, Cher did that so beautifully and talked about, you know, why that happens. And, you know, it's just our body's way of protecting us also.
Yeah.
So, you know, if people want to know more about that, to, you know, just scroll down and go and have a look at that, because I think that, that conversation was so valuable.
Oh, so good. But yeah, and to not, like, don't beat up your kids for that. Like, if they can't speak about something, like say, use your words, they don't have words sometimes. And it just, they can't. You maybe say, let's draw a picture about it, or let's talk about it. But just keep it open and let them come to you gently. You know, and again, if you can, go back and look at the last one that we did. Like Holly said, Cher and Holly and I really spoke about that last week. It was just so powerful. It was so good.
And Kel, just one more thing before we go on.
Yeah.
Also, not saying to children, you talked earlier about how language is so important, not saying to children, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
Because that is almost like victim blaming.
Yeah.
You know, kids are thinking, well, why didn't you bloody know? So
yeah,
you know,
it is true. Yeah.
We really need to be careful, you know, and that's why I'm so grateful for last week, because by getting people to understand the brain science around this and stuff like that, you know, it's like, you know, rape victims, well, why didn't you call out? Well, do you know what? Because they've shut down. And so, you know, knowledge around this stuff is so powerful, and with the education that's happening, that we're doing, is I'm hoping people find it really useful, because, you know, we have to educate to help it, to stop it.
And there's no like 100% right way to do any of this.
Oh, no.
As well, because every kid is different, every situation is different. But if we have an awareness, we can try things on, you know, and see how it works for our kids. And as long as we can remain open about it, and just gentle with the process, kids are more likely to connect. Because if they're acting out of their fear brain, which is their hind brain, they're just shut down. And this is what's starting, even in this process of this grooming, this is what's starting to happen, because they're starting to get afraid, because things are getting a bit more dark and scary. And, you know, they're like, oh, I want to go to mum, but I don't know why I can't go to mum. This is what happened to me, right? So, you know, I have the most beautiful mum and dad. They're just wonderful. I have incredible people in my life. But, you know, it's even that. It's like, I don't want to hurt my mum, because I don't feel safe, and I don't feel good, and I feel a bit gross about this, but I don't know why I feel gross about it. I don't know what's happening. But, you know, it's like showing, so it's kind of like this, right? So they build friendship with you, they get to know you, and then they start touching you on the bum as you go through the fence, telling you how beautiful you are. And then they say, I want to teach you what it's like to love. That's what my uncle did. Okay. And again, I'll talk about my situation, because I can own it. It's mine, and I don't need to seek permission to share it. So that's why I do it. Okay. And then it starts with small touching. Maybe he'll expose himself. Maybe, you know, and maybe it's a she. Okay. Females offend as well. And they'll just start to do little things that open up this access space, and then it just desensitizes the child slowly. It's the same with the online stuff. I'm going to put $50 in your account to take your shirt off. Next week, it might be $100 if you just take your pants off. And I'm going to give you $1,500 if you, you know, do this and let me record it, and I'm going to send it to my friend. Right. So this, all of a sudden, this kid's got lots of money, and they think, oh, wow, this is great. All I have to do is like lay here and do stuff to myself, or, you know, and they don't get what's going on, because then that goes out to all these pedophiles and in all these places across the world. And it's horrible, because that kid doesn't even know they're being victimized, and they don't know why they feel crappy or can't speak up. So this is where that sexualizing, so this is stage 5 of the process of grooming, is sexualizing the relationship. So they've got the trust of the offender's got the trust of the child. They progressively sexualize the relationship. So it starts through the little things, and it just gets bigger and bigger to the point where the victim is naked. And then they just exploit the child's natural curiosity. So they start to ask questions and, you know, advance the sexuality of the relationship. So they increase the physical contact until, you know, the child's at a point where they can't escape. They make a game out of it. They play with the child. Okay, so it becomes this like toing and froing thing. So here there's an example. Lang and Frenzel did a study in 1988 where non-incest child molesters use tactics such as cuddling, offering a massage, and using sex as a game. Okay, Belinda and Conte in 1990 suggest that desensitizing is not only a physical, but can be psychological. For example, a child molester may begin discussing sexual content in an attempt to achieve increased sexualization. So yeah. So it's just, they just build the child up slowly. And then in that process, you become separated from your child and they don't feel like they can speak. And so that's why the education is so important. When they start to feel this fear, when they becomes, I think it must happen sometime, Holly, between stage 3 and 4, when they start to isolate the child, when they start to get really afraid because like, why are they keeping me from my parents? Or why don't I feel like I can speak up? And I think that's where that language must start to come. I mean, I don't know. I say I'm making this up, but it makes sense to me because had I had a language around what I was feeling at that point in time, I might have been able to say something, but I didn't have the education we have now. So.
And you know, it is different for everybody sort of thing. It could be just one thing triggers and go, oh, you know, I've got my early warning signs about that. Oh, that's a bit weird and things like that. But if you don't know your early warning signs, if you don't have language about, well, they didn't feel safe, then, you know, how do you articulate it to adults?
So the last stage is maintaining control. So once they've been isolated, then the predator actually must keep control of that situation. And they do that very cleverly because, and I think I'm making this up again, Holly, but I think it must have some sort of excitement in that phase because they're like, oh, I've achieved this, now I've got to, you know, keep it, and I've got access to this child. And it's really yucky and horrible, but this is just what this says here is stage 6. And again, it's Frenzel, no, let me get it wrong here. I'll make sure I get my research, Finkelhor and Olsen. So they talk about maintaining control as being that once the abuse is occurring, offenders commonly use the secrecy and blame. So that's where they silence the child to say, I can't speak about this because if I do, you know, the predator's going to go to jail. Or my family's, for me, I was so afraid to break up my family because my uncle supported my mum and dad. He came and helped us build our house. He, you know, he spent time with us fishing and camping. My brother and my sister loved him. We all did. And, you know, there's this fear of breaking up the family, of being in trouble and not being believed. And again, it's the chemical responses in the brain. It may not be that you think of any of those things, but something's happening internally and you're like, I can't speak about this. I can't share this because, you know, I'm so, it's just, you just shut down. You don't even have words around it. Even as an adult, there's a lot of adults that can't share at all because they still, and our brains wire themselves to trauma. It doesn't matter if you're 6 or 60, okay? And unless we've put a different strategy or changed the way we've thought about something, then that default pathway is always there, especially if you, that's what trigger is, right? Trigger is like, you can't figure it out, your default pattern. Default, you know, and we're acting out of our rear brain and not our thinking, reasoning section of our brain. And so that's what they do. They create a fear. And they don't know they're doing it. They don't have a language around it either. They just know that's what they got to do if they want to keep control. And that's all it is. Like pedophilia is power and control and selfish behavior.
That's very restrained, Kelly. Well done.
Thank you.
And also, you know, they might have used alcohol or dope or all of those things, pornography, to try and to get them to keep the secret. So, you know, there's the loss of all that as well. And, you know, it is so manipulative. And yeah, we just can't emphasize that enough. Like you said earlier, they are masters at this. They've learned this process through trial and error and things like that. And you know, it might just start off simply as tickling. And if a child resists, oh, well, that didn't work. So, you know, and that's what my hope is, that if my program can put a you know, get kids to put up a barrier, unfortunately, they might move on to another child because, you know, they know that they're not going to get through this child.
Yeah.
You know, they might use dirty jokes and to say, oh, if the kids say, oh, that's not appropriate or that's private or whatever. So,
Yeah.
you know, if we can just put a little chink in the armor for, you know, so that they, you know, to stop them getting at the children, that's my whole goal and life purpose is what, and that's again why I reached out to you was, you know, what could I have built? What resource could I have made that might have helped you, you know, reach out sooner to tell somebody that was happening. So I'm hoping people, you know, you say it a million times, it's about connections, and it is about connections. Sorry?
Has to be. We can't do this work on our own. It's too hard. But I just really want to, and I say thank you all the time, Holly, but I appreciate this so much because I could sit here and do this by myself, and I wanted to, but I can't do it by myself. I don't have all the skills, and with Holly and I coming together, we come from, I mean, Holly's not a survivor herself, but she educates and she's passionate about it, and she's already doing this across the nation in remote areas where people don't speak, where she's talking to men from, you know, Indigenous communities, even where like a white woman speaking to an Indigenous man, I just think, what, you know? And so she's doing some powerful stuff, and she's heard a lot. She's so educated and informed, and you know, my survival experience coming from this space, like it's a perfect place to come together and to do this. And so I'm really proud, I'm really happy and excited to do this, and I'm so grateful for the people that come alongside us. So it's not just me and Holly, it's anyone who comments and shares and becomes part of this journey with us. It's just so freaking valuable, and it keeps me doing this. And even Holly, before we started recording today, this is like, oh, Kel, I'm worried about you. And I'm like, no, I'm actually really good. I'm really good because people keep connecting, and I call my tribe, my people, my family, my community, anyone who starts to get on board with this, because it's really a lonely road by yourself, and it's hard, especially when, and I don't want to get I'm currently running a course with some beautiful ladies who are sharing their heart with me, and the power of vulnerability is just, it's just huge. And I just want to see people, I want this cycle to be broken. That is my absolute heart. So whew, anyway, but I want to quickly get back to this definition before I fog up my glasses that are great news. See, sexy looking. Maintaining control, right? Which I'm not doing very well right now. But it's just about the loss of the relationship. So what they do, what a predator will do, is they get in there and they say to them, basically, you're going to get in trouble if you share this, right? And so kids who are part of sexual abuse relationship are innate people pleasers because they're vulnerable, beautiful kids. Okay, this is what happens, right? And so we get to be adults like me who can't say no, who don't have boundaries, who really struggle with emotional intelligence, and to be able to speak those things. Obviously, I've grown and I've learned a lot from that, but I share that because that is why we struggle to speak up. Okay, it is a struggle of the emotions that are going on, all that sort of stuff. It is, if I get in trouble, then bad things are going to happen to me. And it becomes a default pattern of thinking from as a child all the way through to adulthood, if you don't do the work in between. Okay, so that's what's happening when a pedophile is maintaining control of a child. It's the threat that convincing the child will be the one in trouble if the abuse or the shared secret becomes known, and the loss of the relationship. So they're going to lose their friend. They're going to lose the one that's filled the need. And that is why it's so difficult sometimes, because as parents or older people looking at a child who won't speak up, they won't speak up because unfortunately there's a lot of shame there. But they do have, even though they hate what's happening to them, okay, they hate, it's called splitting. They hate what's happening to them, but they maintain the friendship. There's two different things going on. And so they balance it. So there's like shut down when this is happening, but because I've got a beautiful friend, I'm going to put up with it. Okay. So revealing that and the shame that's all in there just keeps them silent. I don't know. Does that make sense, Holly? Because
Yeah,
It's,
no, totally. I mean, I've met children that, you know, they just want it to stop. They don't
mm,
want that person in jail. They just want the bad thing to
yeah,
stop. They still love them. At the end of the day, it's still a parent or who, you know, somebody close to them usually. Well,
yeah,
we know it's, you know, somebody close to them in some way. So, you know, they don't necessarily want the person banged up and again, on the other side, I've had children that say because of the process, had they known what's going to happen, they wouldn't have ever told
yeah,
because systems have
unfortunately.
failed them. And, you know, so um, again, I cut back to education. Um, you know, I'm hoping that parents will share this with everybody that they know because, yeah, it's not an easy subject and we both don't like having to talk about it all the time. But you know, we just want to protect these children. And if sharing this stuff, if a person goes, oh, I watched Holly and Kelly's video and yeah, there's just something about that didn't sit well with me, ask the question.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of people that will have questions as well. So if you don't want to be named or seen to be asking that question, send us both a private message. Um, I wanted to say something, I forgot, lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
But you can get a hold of either of us. So I got my website, www.kellyhumphries.com, and Kelly Humphries Speaker on Facebook. Obviously, if you're seeing this, you should see it in the feed. You just click on my name and send me a message. Like my page, and then you'll know it comes up. And same with Holly's, safe4kids.com.au.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to go .org. www.safe4kids.com.au.
Yep. And just take the kids on Facebook.
And Safe4Kids with the number 4, not FOR. But I just want to thank you all for coming on board with us. Again, how we're doing this is pre-recording this part, and then we go live on the content, maybe with a special guest. I'm hoping I can get my beautiful friend Sonia Ryan. I'm putting her in it right now, but you can see she's got a quote. She's wrote the foreword for my book, but she's a cyber safety expert, and she also has she runs the Carly Ryan Foundation, and she's campaigned for legislation on grooming. So if we can get her to come on board, it would be so powerful, because she has just done so much work, and she's one of my mentors, one of my very close friends, and I just love her to bits. And she's just a beautiful, like, soul sister. But yeah, I'm hoping she'll be able to come on board. She doesn't know, but anyway, she's the Carly Ryan Foundation. They have lots of information and resources on their website as well. So big shout out to them at the moment. As we tie up this video for today, there's a lot that we haven't spoken about. There is so much that we haven't spoken about. So if you want, we might even be able to do another video on this, Holly. But if you've got questions, again, please put them in the feed, private message us. Have I missed anything, Holly?
No, I'd just like to thank that beautiful mum for reaching out and consenting to share her story because, you know, she really wanted people to know how grateful she was for these videos that we're doing, but also for people to understand about the whole spectrum of sexual abuse and how, you know, that the grooming doesn't have to be threatening and things like that, that sometimes children just know not to tell.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Please stay tuned for dates for next week. It may not be next week. It may be the week after, just depending on what's popping up for us this week. So stay with us. Stay connected. Please like and share this video. It will be on YouTube as well. It'll be uploaded. But yeah, the more people that get these messages, guys, the more lives we save. So please come alongside us in this mission that we both have to protect families, to empower families, to protect kids, and just help us get it out there. So thank you again, guys. Appreciate it. Much love.
See you, Kel.
See ya.